Hey, my name is Paul Maxwell, and today we're going to talk about how to transition from having a job or working a job that you don't like into being self-employed and building a linear relationship between the work that you put in and the effort that you bring out. I've learned this over the past year and a half, building a 7-figure agency for myself. Again, I know a lot of people say that on social media. I actually did it. It's been an insane year and a half, but I did transition from working a role that I did not love in an industry that I did not understand, to getting a higher paying role, to figuring out how to start a business, doing that for myself and scaling that business. So I'm going to show you exactly how to do that. Now, when people tell you how to start a business, they start with all the wrong pieces of advice. Okay. They start with how to build a website. You have to start talking on social media. Here's how to build a brand. You got to get a logo, right? They tell you how to do all the infrastructure stuff, but they don't tell you the actual path to generating revenue. They will tell you each of these specific pieces of like micro advice along different stages, but won't tell you kind of the macro narrative that you have to put into place in order to grow from where you are to where you want to be. So today we're going to solve that problem. And what we're going to do is we're going to replace all that other advice that you get that's kind of like tactical stuff along the way for a bigger piece of advice, for the actual steps and the framework you need to conceive yourself in, the story you need to live out in order to into a place where you go from a low paying job to a high paying self-employed situation. Okay. And none of this is guaranteed. Obviously, this is just what I did and how I understand it. Okay. So this is, can we do this? Okay, good. All right. So this is how to work for yourself. And we're going to call this the job to self-employment pipeline. Okay. Now we're going to split things up a little bit here. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to say, all right, here's your 9 to 5. Okay. 9 a.m. right to 5 p.m. right. This is what we would consider, let's say, your workday, right? And most people think I'm going to spend my 9 to 5 figuring out how I can go and improve my life and get a job, right? And let's say that there's a point here where you have a starting point where you have your personal interest. Okay. I have a personal interest or skill. Let's say there's a reason you have a personal interest is because you're good at something. Let's say you're interested in social media, right? So you're interested in social media and you think to yourself, I'd like to own my own social media agency, right? Where I have my own clients, I charge my own rates, right? So that's very good. So the first thing that you have to do is recognize that, first of all, the way that you build a business is not by doing it here in the 9 to 5. Okay. The way that you build a business is, first of all, you go about doing this in the 5 to 9, as Alex Hormozy talks about. Okay. So in the 5 to 9 here, and in the 5 a.m. to 9 a.m. here, in the 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. here. Okay. This is where the actual work or magic happens, right? Okay. This is where the magic happens. All right. So in doing that, the first stage is going to develop kind of in 4 stages here. Okay. Where you have your personal interest. And in this personal interest, let's say you're working a personal job or an existing job now. What you have to do is you have to observe. You have to observe, for example, people that are doing the thing you want to do for other companies, right? So for example, if you want to start your own social media agency, don't say, oh man, how do I go about getting clients for a social media agency? How would I go about doing that? You're putting the cart in front of the horse. What you want to do is you want to observe people doing this in corporate settings or business settings. So who are social media managers who are currently doing this already at companies? So not at an agency level, okay? Because what we're wanting to do is we're wanting to say, we're going to move from kind of, let's say we've got amateur, and then you move to company employee, then you move to agency employee, where you really know what you're doing, and then you move to, let's say, I don't know, freelancer. And if you're an agency employee, you probably are already a freelancer, and then you move down to agency owner. Okay. Now, I want to observe company employees doing what I want to do. So this would be, the person managing social media at Wendy's, right? Like, how do I get to that spot? Now, here's my story doing this. I was working as an SEO person, which has nothing to do with what I wanted to do, but what I was doing is I was helping write website content essentially for a tech company. I saw the app developers at that company building applications, coding iOS applications, and I said, how do I do what you do? I have no idea how to enter into this market. There's this whole idea of like learn to code. And I had no idea what that meant, right? So I went up to the director of engineering at that company and I said, how do I learn to code? How do I learn to do what you do? And he said, what you want to do is you want to download these apps. You want to download I think it was the Mimo app. And he said, learn Swift. Now going back, I realized that he was speaking from his own perspective and there was probably better advice I could have gotten, but I really appreciated his advice and his time. But what he told me to do was he told me what to do outside of my working hours, right? And what you do is you grow here from having your personal interests. Let's just say, let me just erase this. Let me just erase these items here. Let's say that right, that I have my personal interest is social media. Okay, great. Good stuff. Now I go from personal interest to, I go from personal interest to industry awareness. And when I have industry awareness, I know now what I need to do to upskill. And I'm going to use my 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. time to upskill. And I'm going to choose a learning path. And I'm going to say, as an example here, I'm going to learn, let's say, posting, content, formulas, and analytics and revenue attribution. I'm going to learn these things to determine, to upskill, right? In my personal social media competencies, right? Let's say I have that industry awareness. And here in my day job, in my 9 to 5, this is where I volunteer, right? And my upskilling serves to add value to the volunteer work that I do here. And I've talked about this in a previous video, but people have this aversiveness to this where they're like, I'm not going to volunteer my time. My time's worth money. The experience and the networking benefits you're getting from this is insane. So you spend your 5 to 9, right? Upskilling in this time. So that's taking courses, that's starting your own social media account, that's just starting your own micro business, right? Where you're not putting all your weight on it, but you're literally saying, I'm going to start a little website or a little business or a little brand just to learn what I'm doing here. I think starting a micro business or a micro brand is a really good exercise. Now, don't let that be a blocker to you because some people get, some people, they focus on this whole thing. It's like, oh, I'm going to start a micro brand in order to learn to upskill and And the act or the sort of trappings around upskilling they cannibalize the entire process. The focus here is getting these skills. Okay. So you use, again, the whole premise here is that you use your 5 to 9 to elevate your 9 to 5. Okay. Now we go from industry awareness, okay, to role achievement, right? So now what we're doing is we are saying, I'm going to apply, right? And here I'm going to ask to volunteer. And next I'm going to apply to other roles. And in this case, what I do is I'm going to get a job as a social media manager at a company, right? Now I'm moving from here, right? I'm moving from here to here, right? This is 1, this is 2, this is 1, this is 2. And what I'm doing here is now I'm documenting everything I'm learning as the social media manager or as the social media worker for company A. And in my 5 to 9, this is where I can actually start to freelance with an emphasis on free. So I'm going to do work and I'm just going to build up testimonials. Okay. And here what I'm doing is I'm building my point of view, and testimonials. Okay. So that's what I'm doing there during that time. And then I take all of the experience that I have here and I kind of cross the threshold where finally I enter into this place where I get enough of a savings, where I've got enough of a runway, where I've got runway and I've got sales pipeline where I can actually move into the place where I am self-employed. Okay. And the key here is, how do I generate leads, right? Well, what I do is let me see if I can do this here. Okay. I take these testimonials, right? And I use this to generate leads. Okay. I use this to generate leads from referrals, testimonials, case studies, cold outreach. And if I want, I can even do ads, right? But I have to generate leads. Okay. Leads, that's how I get here, from freelance to here. Freelance is the foundation on which I do leads. And that volunteer, that upskill, that is the basis on which I'm able to do freelance. Okay. Now, let me go back down here. Now, once I'm here, I use my documentation here as my process, because remember, I've talked about this in a previous video. Your process is your product. And here is where you document your process, because process equals product. All right. Good. And finally, we move into this place where during the day, you're upskilling. So you're now no longer upskilling on the 5 to 9. You're now upskilling during the 9 to 5. The work you're doing is making you better at what you're doing. This is the hardest thing to do. Okay. So this is the bottleneck for most people. This industry awareness phase. Okay. This industry awareness phase is the bottleneck for most people. This is a crazy bottleneck. I was here for 2 years. And during my 5 to 9, here in the morning and here at night, or here at night, here in the morning, I was coding. I was doing coding courses, building my coding portfolio, learning JavaScript and learning more JavaScript and learning more JavaScript and learning more JavaScript and learning TypeScript and learning React and learning HTTP and learning servers and learning Kubernetes and learning Docker and learning Linux and learning all this and learning Git and GitHub and all this stuff, right? This is before AI. Okay. And I was just coding. I would wake up early and I would go to bed late. And during the day, I was doing something that wasn't related really at all to my coding. Okay. And eventually I was able to parlay that into a full-time coding job, right? Eventually I was doing freelance stuff on the side. And then eventually I moved that into a full-time thing, right? Whereas now during my 5 to 9, I can focus on growing. I can grow. And okay, right. And then what I'm adding here is I'm now getting what? I'm getting more plus higher quality leads. And so that I can charge more and hire to outsource low wage work. And this is what the growth season looks like. Okay. And that's kind of what leads into that. But this is basically the 4 phases, all right, of going from basically personal interest to industry awareness to role achievement to self-employed. And then from there, you go into this growth stage where you're getting more and higher quality leads, and you're using the work that you're doing during your full-time job to increase your skills, to generate more testimonials, right? And you get into this loop where you're doing, work. Whoops. You're in this loop, right? It's an earnings loop, right? Where you're doing work, which leads to upskill, which leads to better work, which leads to testimonials. Actually, what you're really doing is you're doing work, which leads to testimonials, which leads to higher quality leads, which leads to more interesting / challenging work, right? Which leads to upskill, which leads to more work, which leads to testimonials, and you're in this virtuous cycle, right? We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. And this is basically the cycle. So the whole premise here of what we're talking about is that you're leveraging your 9 to 5, your 5 to 9 rather. You're leveraging your 5 to 9. Okay. You're leveraging this time. Let's put that in green, right? You're leveraging this 5 to 9 time in order to increase what you're making in your 9 to 5. And the whole idea here, of course, is that you are continuing, right, to grow through this path to achieve financial freedom, doing one of the most common business models, which is a professional services model. So I hope this is helpful for you. This is one of the most common ways that people go from being self-employed to from working a job that they don't love to doing something that's self-employed that they really do love. Okay. So again, the key here is going from this step where you use your 5 to 9 to identify your personal interest. Then you use your 5 to 9 during that personal interest time to upskill and then volunteer during your 9 to 5, right? And then you use the skills you gain from that time to leverage your way and apply into a full-time role where you're doing that thing full-time for a company in-house. And on your 5 to 9, you're freelancing, and on your 9 to 5, you're doing that role. And then you use all that experience to build up freelance employees so that they can generate testimonials for you, so that you can use those testimonials as a basis to generate more leads, as to ask for referrals, to do ads, to have before and after case studies. That's the material to do all this advertising. And then you use that to leverage your way, to parlay your way, and to generate sales pipeline, and to generate cash for runway. Then you start your own business, and you transfer basically that freelance. You swap the 5 to 9 activities you're doing for freelance into full time, and then you use your 5 to 9 times to grow, to continue to upskill, to charge more, to generate more and higher quality leads, and to hire people to outsource to do that low value or low wage work so that you can focus just on that billable high wage work. And then you go through the agency cycle. Now, how you grow a business that you start is a completely separate video, which we can do at another time. And then you enter into that virtuous loop where you're doing work, testimonials, gets you higher quality leads, more interesting, more challenging work. Upscaling leads to more work, and blah, 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 right? And that's the earnings loop where your rates just increase the more work that you do, the easier it is to get leads and the easier it is to get referrals. So hope that was helpful to you. If you're interested in starting a business, remember, it's very key. It's how you use your 5 to 9 outside of your 9 to 5, your 5 to 9 a.m. and your 5 to 9 p.m. You use it, first of all, to observe, then to upskill, then to freelance, then to grow and refine. And it's about leveraging the work that you can do in your 5 to 9 as an advantage over everybody else that wants to go out and just have fun during their 5 to 9. But this is how you get your sort of quote unquote grind set down and say, all right, outside of work, I'm going to leverage that time as an advantage to higher quality and higher leverage things during my 9 to 5 that actually propel me forward into my vision of the future, because all of this is about vision. All of this is about seeing this reality where you are saying, boom, I want to live in the box where my 9 to 5 is me doing this high value, high leverage, high earning, high wage work where I get the financial benefit of all of that work that's being done. And I'm moving from this place where I'm doing low value work with no upside, and I'm not receiving any benefit from what's being done. I want to go from here and I want to go to here. Okay. So that's how you do it. Let me know if this resonates with your experience. Subscribe to my newsletter, follow my link in the show notes. And then of course we have a private community that you can join. And I also do private consultations. All of those links are in the show notes. So feel free to reach out to me. This is a completely passion project for me on the side. And so thanks again for tuning in, and I'll talk to you later.